Before we start, Dan Hutter from the River Forest Civic Association is going to say a few words.
Hi, I am from the River Forest Civic Association. Has anyone heard of the River Forest Service Club?
Yes.
Of course. Okay, so that's what this is. We've rebranded ourselves to just be a little bit more inclusive. It is for those of you that don't know, it's an organization that really at the core helps you feel connected to your community in a lot of different ways, in the ways we hold our meetings and have people from different boards casually talk about what's going on there, in how we help sponsor, like we did help co-sponsor this event. So it's a very interesting group. We also do the Memorial Day Parade in River Forest along with the picnic that's there after. So if anyone's interested in learning about joining, we're taking new members. In fact, we're also looking for board members. So there's information back on the desk, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. So we'll take it on.
Thank you. We really appreciate the River Forest Civic Association's help with these forums in securing locations and time. So Kristen Coe and Dan Carter have done a great job with this, and we really thank them for their help. My name is Peggy Kell, and I'm the Voter Service Chair for the League of Women Voters of Oak Park and River Forest. I will be the moderator for the evening. We are a nonpartisan political organization. We don't endorse candidates or political parties. Our job is to advocate and educate our members and the community on local, state, and national issues. We are open to membership for men and women, so we would love to have new members. If you go to our website at lwoprf.org, you can look at all of our events and see what's going on, and also have some links to other organizations that we partner with to make sure that we're covering, that all of our members have interest in other organizations, and so we partner up with a couple of things like the Earth Festival, the Film Festival, and with other organizations. So I'm going to keep working at that. Our next forum will be tomorrow in River Forest at Roosevelt Middle School, and that will be for the River Forest Park Board and the River Forest Elementary School District 90. So those of you from River Forest, here you can attend another forum tomorrow. Same time, check in at 6:30, and the forum starts at 7. Next Tuesday, on the 26th, there will be a forum at Julian Middle School in Oak Park for the Oak Park trustees. That will do the same thing, check in at 6:30, and the forum will start at 7. So if you want to see those in person, you can do that. We are videotaping this forum. Thank you, John Griffin, for doing that. And that will be posted. It'll probably take a few days for him to get it together, but everything is posted on our website. So if you've missed any of our other forums, you can go to our website, either on the voter service page or on the events page, and see a link to all of the videos. All right, for the ground rules tonight, candidates will have 1 minute opening and closing statements. This will be followed by questions from the audience, and they will be 1 minute long. We have a timer right in the front row that will hold up a paddle at 30 seconds and then at 15 seconds. When the paddle goes up to stop, you do not have to stop mid-sentence. We'll let you finish your thought, but we would really like to respect the time and give the next person sufficient time to answer. The speaking order for starting was developed with drawing lots when the candidates came in and checked in. So we're starting at the other, Amanda's going to start, and we'll go all the way down this way. And then for the next question, we start with Sarah, and then it goes down the other way. So everybody gets a chance to be first to answer or speak. I want to make sure, as moderator, I will look at the questions. I'll make sure that there's no duplications. No personal questions. We can talk about that afterwards if you have an issue with that, but we want to make sure that all of our candidates can answer the questions that are asked here. Do you have any questions? Anything? Right. All right, at the end, there'll be some time, we should go to about 8:15. At the end, there'll be some time to meet and greet the candidates if you have some additional questions that you'd like to ask them. Also, as you think of a question maybe as someone's talking, there are index cards at the back of the table, and our members, our voter service members, will have them also. All you have to do is maybe raise your hand if you have an index card or you've written it on another piece of paper. Just hold it up, and one of our members, our committee members, will come by and pick it up and give it to me. Okay? All right, thank you very much. We will start with Amanda with an opening statement of 1 minute.
My name is Amanda Massey, and originally my family and I moved here in 1997. We left in 2003 due to a job transfer. My kids went to Whittier School. My kids are interracial. My husband's black, so I certainly understand the equity issues and what they've had to go through. We've lived all over the country, Virginia, Florida, Pennsylvania, Northern California, Southern California, and so I certainly understand what's going on in regards to having to fight for your kids in school, etc., to be treated as equally as possible. We chose to move back here in 2012 to retire, and so we bought a house in South Oak Park and have been restoring it ever since, and became very involved in 2015 with what was going on at the high school and some of the facility issues, and continued to stay in contact with them. And after our last tax bill in 2017, I decided I needed to walk the talk, because if we were going to do something that I needed to be involved in, helping with some of the expenses. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Dixon-Spivey, and I am one of the incumbents along with Fred Arkin. The reason that we are running, or the reason, I don't want to speak for you, Fred, the reason that I am running again is not so different from why I first ran 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I was walking with my beautiful 6-month-old and my partner, and a woman down our block came up to us and said, you know, your baby's beautiful, but the high school's not great for black boys. And we sort of looked at each other and thought, like, why are we paying all this money to be here? If that's, I mean, that's the precise reason that we came here, was so that our son would have a great education. So the reason that I'm running again is not because the work hasn't been done, it's because the work isn't finished. We have gotten our arms around this equity issue, and it was on our minds well before America to Be came out. We now have a director of equity. We now have a racial equity policy that's almost in place. So we are well poised to enter the next term position to make real progress, but I think it's imperative that we keep some history on the board and that the board remains focused on the issues.
Thank you. Fred?
Hi, my name is Fred Arkin. I have lived the majority of my life in Oak Park and River Forest. I ran for the board first with Sarah back in 2015 because I had been a lifelong volunteer, primarily with youth organizations and youth sports in the village, and I felt it was time to contribute at a higher level. I feel I had a very keen understanding of our community's history, our unique culture, the ideals of fairness, youth development, and achievement. I agree with Sarah. I'm running for re-election because not that we've accomplished all our goals, but the work is still ongoing, and the table is set. And I believe that our superintendent, Joylyn Pruitt-Adams, has has the tables set to reach some very, very tangible goals within the next couple of years.
Thank you. Ralph?
Hi, Ralph Martiri. I'm running for the board for a simple reason. I think this is a propitious moment in time. The community is very aware of the issues confronting Oak Park High School, River Forest High School, because of the documentary. And I think the chance to make long-term sustainable change is really here now. And I do have a background that I think will help actually realize the goal of a truly equitable and excellent education system at the high school. I'm currently the president of the school board in River Forest District 90. We started an equity initiative 4 years ago that actually is now being used as a national model and as a toolkit for 5, 6 other states. And it looks like it's going to have a lot of promise. And I've served on the federal level and at the state level working on education reforms, all focused on equity. Changing systems is hard, changing the Oak Park River Forest High School will be hard, but I do have some experience in getting that done, and I think at this moment in time, that experience will really help realize the end game.
Thank you. Gina?
Good evening, thank you so much for coming out. My name is Gina Harris, and I graduated from Oak Park about 30 years ago, and my younger daughter graduated from OPR last year. And I was surprised at how many similar issues were still in place in the high school, excuse me, that I experienced as well, and a little bit disappointed. And so I went to the school board and voiced my concerns, and they invited me to be on a committee, and I said yes, of course. The Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee, which I've served on for the past couple of years. And what's important to me about this work is having experience, because I'm an educator. I teach in Maywood, Illinois, and having the opportunity to do this work across the country. I sit on the board of directors for the National Education Association, and so the work that we've done around racial justice and education has been really impactful on the ground. And so I've watched systems and supported systems in making the changes that were needed, and I was like, it's time to do this, so I said yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Vic?
Hi, I'm Vic Rito. An ongoing challenge at OPR is the persistence of the opportunity gap. We need to raise the levels of achievement for all our students in a consistent and coordinated way. We've implemented a range of programs without a strategic focus or a corresponding lack of coordination, consistency, and assessment. These are all needed to provide the benchmarks and accountability that are needed for teachers, staff, the leadership team, and the board in order to make progress in reducing the gap. OPR is also facing key decisions on facilities and finances. We have to address the facility needs that directly affect academics and end the pool saga in a fiscally responsible way. OPR went through the Imagine process that identified needs and potential solutions, and now we need to take the next step and develop a long-term financial and facility plan that balances what we can afford as a community while addressing the most critical facility needs.
Thank you. You have to pass that all the way back down because Sarah's going to start first. Also, I failed to mention right at the beginning that there are 6 candidates and they are running for 3 open positions. Okay? So the first question, Sarah, what do you think the reserve fund balance should be?
So,
And if you, excuse me, if you need me to repeat a question at any time, just ask.
So best practice indicates that our fund balance should be anywhere from 25 to 75% of our annual budget. Right now it's too high. It's hovered around $100,000 for the entire time that I've been on the board. Our annual budget is closer to 80, so clearly we are well out of bounds. About 2 years ago, with the help of Tom Kofsky, we, maybe 3 years ago now, instituted a policy that says that our practice is to keep it between 75 and 25. So as a board, we were well aware of the issue. We were very concerned about it, but one of the things we wanted to make sure we didn't do was deficit spend for operating costs, because that is not going to end us up in a place we want to be, because then we don't have the money to continue to pay those operating costs once we reach our target. So what we've opted to do instead is to put that money towards capital improvements. So we have $32 million going towards our new ADA compliance, new classrooms, new common areas, and then $20 million that's going into a reserve for future capital projects, which brings us right in the middle of our 25 to 75% target.
Thank you. Fred?
Right, I agree with Sarah. It's our board policy that we have that our fund balance be between 25 and 75% of our annual budget, which would bring it between 20 and $60 million. We're currently, I think, at about $107 million. We've already given about $32 to $35 million back to the community in the form of abatements. If you, I ask that everybody take a look at your tax bills and see, take a look at our spreadsheet at mine. Over the years, I can tell you that my tax bill is 13% less in 2017 than it was in 2013. So I think we've been a good, for those taxes that are applicable to District 200, okay, not my tax bill. So I do believe that our teacher's contract is giving us the ability to contain costs and to balance our budget, pushing a referendum down the road several years.
Thank you. Ralph?
Yeah, I think fortunately this has become less of an issue now because I think the board has instituted a couple of sound policies in dealing with their overly large reserve that was accidentally run up to north of $100 million. What you want to do though is continue to exercise sound fiscal practices as you manage the financial side of the district. I think be more transparent in your reporting about not only what you're doing with your surplus, but what you're also doing with your day-to-day expenditures. We actually, at River Forest District 90, implemented a new financial reporting system available online. Please go to our website, 6 pages long. Everything you want to know about the district. Overtime, 10-year trends, and teacher salaries, and expenses per child, et cetera, et cetera. Nice pictures, inflation adjusted. And I think that kind of transparency would help. And I completely agree that any excess money left over in this particular fund ought not be used to justify deficit spending. You really need to build capital assets with it.
Thank you. Gina?
So as has already been mentioned, the policy that the board has put in place is an actual reasonable policy. And if we're looking long-term, for me, what I'm thinking about as we think about the operating plan, from my experience in business, has been to ensure that we do not go into deficit spending. I know that's already been said, but when we start looking at down the road, if we begin to only have a conversation about 5 and 10 years and not really looking at 20 years, and actually what's going to be required in our classrooms, we need to be looking further down the line. And so I think maintaining that operating balance, always being really mindful and considerate of what our students are going to need in the classroom, because what we know, and as an educator I can tell you, is that what's happening in the classroom is changing, and it's changing pretty swiftly. So we need to really be mindful of that long term.
Thank you. Dick?
I agree with what has been said already. The 25 to 75% of your operating budget is a good target. And having an excessive fund balance is actually a problem, because if you, depending on how you pay it down, if you pay it down through deficit spending, you're forced into a referendum that's actually quite large. And our taxes go up faster than inflation, not because of the yearly CPI increases, but it's because of the referendum that we keep passing, either the operating or the capital referendum that we pass as a community over the past few years. And so I think it's imperative that we pay it down through capital spending, and that we need to really put together a long-term capital plan, capital and financial plan like we have at the Park District, that's allowed us to invest over $60 million in the last 8 years in a fiscally responsible way without raising taxes. We need to implement the same thing at the high school so that we can understand how we're going to pay for needed facility plans.
Thank you.
Amanda Massey. One of the things that nobody has mentioned is that up until the last couple of months, there has not been a balanced budget in D200. We have been overspending, we've been spending more than we have been taking in for many, many years. Gratefully, right now, there's a balanced budget, which is great, and we're moving in the right direction. But we need to basically figure everything out as far as priorities versus wants, needs versus wants, and spend accordingly. Everything that we do, we need to think about how we're going to pay for it. Is this going to benefit the most amount of students? And is this going to benefit their education?
Thank you. We're going to start the next question with Fred. What is your thinking on Imagine OPRF and the role it could play in the future? What are the limitations and drawbacks of having such a comprehensive plan?
Okay, well, the Imagine plan came out of, it was the brainchild of Dr. Pruitt-Adams. It came out of 2 failed previous attempts, and the reason the prior attempts couldn't garner community consensus was that they really did not look comprehensively at our facilities needs. The Imagine plan, which was made up, committee which was made up of community members and a few staff members, looked at the needs. They did a tremendous amount of research and surveying. They looked at everything from curriculum to facilities to extracurriculars to activities, and came up with an overview of needs analysis. That's the governing document. That has to be a living document that is updated constantly, and then prioritize those items that are needed, and along with the tax dollars that are available to spend.
Thank you. Al?
So I think the Imagine Plan was really good work, but it is a core responsibility of the board to do long-term facilities management. And the D200 board really hasn't done that for an extended period of time. So the Imagine Plan is a nice starting point, but I think every year, the board twice a year should consider a 5 and 10-year rolling facilities plan. Start with the Imagine Plan as a base, modify it as needs change. The weather may change, the things that you have to do that you thought you were going to have to do in 7 years to being having it done in the next 18 months, right? So that's why you constantly need to monitor your facilities plan and you need to make sure that you have the resources available to cover the things you know you have to maintain in an old building, and then budget for those things that actually might enhance the student environment that are add-ons. What we did at D90, we've always had that sort of sound fiscal management at D90, but one thing we've done differently recently is we identify our 5 and 10-year plans in 2 different colors, and we publicize that to the public. The greens are things we have to do, the yellow are things we'd like to do, and we show the cost so the whole public knows exactly what the facility needs in the district are.
Thank you. Gina?
So you asked about the drawbacks and the benefits, and I actually am really grateful for the work that the Imagine Plan team did, because they did find some things that we would not have uncovered. Some of the spaces that we need to be looking at for career development for our students who are not going to college but who are planning to have a thriving career in a vocation. And so knowing that those areas need to have more support, more attention, that would not have come up had they not gone through this plan. So the drawback of not having parameters placed on it actually became the biggest benefit for us looking in the long term of what's really going to be possible, because we got a much broader picture of what's actually needed for our students to be successful in the building, and for our students to feel less policed, for our students to feel like this is their home, for our students to have additional time to be in the building. So if we're looking at the Imagine Plan, the pieces that have already been put in place that are really important, and really taking it to the next step of how do we move that along. Looking long-term will be important, but there are some really solid pieces in there that will really benefit and impact our students on a daily basis.
Thank you. Vic?
So I think the benefit of the Imagine Plan was it did a great assessment of all our needs and identifying areas where the school needs to improve and to get into the 21st century. And it developed an outline of potential solutions. And if I had $218 million in my back pocket, I would implement the whole plan. But the problem that the high school has, it doesn't know if it has $218 million, $100 million, or $40 million. And so that's why we need a long-term financial plan that lays out the costs of Imagine and determines what we can afford over the long term, and then scales the project to fit within the financial constraints and what the community can afford.
Thank you. Amanda?
For those of you who don't know, the Imagine Plan cost about $300,000 to do. Was it worth it? That's kind of up to the voters one way or another, but it did certainly, as everybody has said, bring up a lot of issues that we needed to look at as far as facilities are concerned. The Imagine Plan was heavily loaded with athletics, but the great thing is the $32.6 million that we're doing first is heavily loaded in education as far as affecting the most students, which I fully support in regards to that. Okay, that was a quick 30 seconds. I think that everything that we do at the high school needs to be thought about as far as education and affecting the most children. I think that we need more vocational training for the kids who are not going on to college. More and more kids do not go on to college for various reasons. We need to be doing more in that area so that those who aren't going on to college will also be successful when they get out of high school.
Thank you. Sarah?
So when Dr. Prudhomme initially approached us with this idea of doing a superintendent's committee around facilities, I was hesitant, and in fact I was the only person on the board to vote no. For much of the reasons that Ralph actually mentioned, I felt like it was our responsibility and that we were sort of passing the buck, a very painful buck, to poor unsuspecting community members. In the end, though, I do think that they did a tremendous job. I think it's incredibly comprehensive. Asking what the downside is, it's sort of like saying, what's the downside to going to the doctor? Well, you might find out you're sick, right? I don't think that we really have a realistic downside to the imagined plan. But what it can't be is static. We have to keep reevaluating the needs in the building. Our students really helped us with this and did a great job of prioritizing what they felt were the most important needs in the building. But of course, our students change every few years. So we do need to keep going back and keep revitalizing that plan. Much as Ralph had indicated, we do need to keep doing this on a rolling basis to make sure that we stay current.
Thank you. The next question is going to start with Ralph. How do you differentiate yourself from other candidates?
Well, my day job is education policy, so I think that makes a little bit of a difference, and I think you can tell where someone's going to go by where they've been. So I tell you, I want to significantly reduce the inequities at the Oak Park River Forest High School, and I've worked with D200 to eliminate inequities in that school system. I actually co-authored the state's new school funding bill, which is called the evidence-based formula, which literally guarantees, if it's fully funded, both an adequate amount of resources for every school district in the state and an equitable distribution of those resources. I also served on a federal commission on educational excellence and equity under the Obama administration, and we issued a national report that is now being used in 7 states, where I am an advisor on how to build equitable and excellent education systems. So I have a lot of expertise specifically in the field of using equity as a lens to create excellence. And I think what I'm concerned about is when the community frequently hears equity, they hear zero-sum game, and it is not. An equitable system is excellent for all learners. You're most gifted, you're most challenged, irrespective of race or gender.
Thank you. Gina?
I think the main thing that sets me apart from the other candidates is that I'm an educator. And in order for us to really begin to accomplish what needs to be accomplished on the ground in the high school, we really need to be able to work together. We have a lot of rhetoric in our world right now around us versus them. And for me, it's really important that every voice is represented when we have conversations about decisions that are impacting our students. So that's the one piece that sets me apart. I also think the unique experience that I've had as a student and as a parent, and having the similar experiences repeat themselves, really feels valuable in how we are going to be able to navigate the changes that need to happen. I don't know about you, but I don't know how many of you want someone who's never done your job before coming in to tell you how to do your job. And as an educator working in a building, it's really nice to know that there are other educators having conversations about what really happens and how that policy and that plan can be implemented effectively, as well as we would love to have support and be able to support each other.
Thank you. Vic?
I think understanding the community, I've lived here my entire life. I remember growing up and had discussions about cul-de-sacs along along Austin. And then playing basketball at every full courts at every single school and park in the village, and watching them get taken down one by one during the 70s and early 80s because people were afraid of crime. And we know what that was a code for. And so, growing up here, having all my siblings go through the high school, my 5 siblings, my 2 daughters, 8 nieces and nephews on their way, I understand the challenges and the history behind Oak Park. And then I also think my experience in the Park District, putting together long-term financial and facility plans, implementing those, and over the last 8 years, implementing $60 million of renovations and capital improvements, all without raising taxes. And then finally, my experience as a project manager at Argonne National Lab for over the last 30 years, where I've implemented and constructed large-scale science experiments, so I know how to run a project and get things done.
Thank you. Amanda?
In my professional life, I did accounting, and I was also a manager, pretty much a manager in pretty much anywhere that I worked. So I have a lot of experience in numbers, and I certainly have a lot of experience in collaboration. I'm also, I have been involved and gone to meetings. I'm sure Sarah and Craig will tell you that. They've seen me at enough meetings and seen me speak at enough meetings to know that I know what's going on at the high school. And as I've told you, I have experience in regards to the equity issue because of my grown sons. And I also have always felt like the teachers were never quite involved enough in what was going on at the meetings. The lack of transparency that they have, being that there's nothing that's videotaped so that you can see it, the teachers can see it, anybody can see it, is a real issue. Unless you go and show up at meetings, you really are not involved and you don't know what's going on, and I think that's a huge issue. And for me, I've been involved in all of that and I've spoken in regards to all of that. So I do know what's going on and I do know all the pieces of the puzzle.
Thank you, Sarah.
So most of my career I spent as a Cook County Public Defender, as did my partner. He actually grew up in Austin, and we met in the office. You don't need to know that. But you know, systemic racism is something we talk about every single day in my house. I mean, it's just a reality that we live with. We see it from the criminal justice system side, but certainly we also in my home know what it looks like when the educational system fails our kids, right? I mean, those become our clients. So that is the perspective I bring to the board. When I first got on the board, one of the things that I wanted to do was start a committee to look at discipline of Black students, especially boys. So I, with the help of Jess Weiss-Glass, who's here, founded the Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee to look at specifically that, right, how race plays out in our discipline process. So I think that is what I bring to the board, not to mention the 4 years of board experience. You know what you're going to get. I've been very consistent in how I voted on policies, and my vision is clear as to what I want to continue to do.
Thank you. Fred?
Sure. I differentiate myself by, for the last 41 years, I've engaged directly with our students. I've been involved in youth development, primarily sports, working day to day, every day with kids, understanding how achievement works. And achievement, there's a pretty simple pyramid that we've developed in some of our programs, especially the wrestling program, and that is building the foundation on trust and building a relationship. Once you have that, then you can set high expectations, hold them accountable, and celebrate their success. I also have in-depth institutional knowledge. I've been around the high school and I have a passion for the high school for the great majority of my life. And so I have the wherewithal and the knowledge of both how to deal with kids and how to work with them to get them to achieve, and the processes of the institution.
Thank you. Next question, I'll start with Gina. How will you strike a balance between needs of the district for budget increases to support student needs and the desire of the community to limit or even reduce taxes?
This is such a good question. I think that the balance really comes from being extremely mindful of what we're doing with every single resource that we have, as well as looking at what can we do across our community to ensure that the conversations that we're having are not only being had at D200. We need to be working collaboratively with D97 as well as the other taxing bodies in the village to really be talking about this overall impact that we're having. So I've mentioned this in a few different places. I find that it's very important that we begin to have conversations about community, not in an isolated way. And I also believe that in order for us to really balance those needs of, because what I'm hearing in this question is, there's community members who really want to make sure that we limit the amount of spending, and then we also have some spending that we have to do. And as a single mom of a daughter in college, I can guarantee you, I understand how to do that, but my experience, and I have a master's in business as well, and so having spent some years having to manage large budgets, what I'm clear on is that it is possible, but we have to maintain our focus on it clearly.
Thank you. Dick?
Well, currently, we spend $23,000 a year per student. Evidence-based funding profiled by the state says we should spend, I think it's around $18,000, and the state average is $13,000. So it's not an issue of resources to address the needs, especially the achievement gap of the students. I think we're spending enough resources. We just have to be smart about how we allocate those resources, and that's the responsibility of the senior administration to effectively implement programs and evaluate them and then change them as needed so that we're using money efficiently and wisely. I think we're worried about taxes. The tax bill is going up faster than the inflation rate because we keep passing referendum, capital and operating referendum for our school districts, and then the villages, of course, is not tax capped. And so we just, once again, have to put together a long-term financial facilities plan so that we can understand what the long-term facility costs will be for implementing Imagine and facility needs that directly affect academics.
Thank you. Amanda?
Well, it always comes down to needs versus wants when you're looking at money that you need to spend. And we have an old building, as people have said, and we have facilities that do need to be redone. But they need to be done smartly, and they need to be done in a way that makes sense and will benefit the most students. It's, again, I'll say it over and over again, it's needs versus wants. And we need to basically reevaluate as soon as we do something and say, okay, how are we going to pay for this? Do we need to save for it? Is this something we can put off for a year or two? We need to think smartly, just like we do at home. You know, you don't go into a remodel and go, let's just do everything, see what happens, and then we'll figure out where the money comes from. This is something we need to plan, and whether it's a long-term plan, which definitely needs to be done, but it also needs to be reevaluated periodically as things come up. If all of a sudden we have a hole in the roof, that's an urgent need and has to be taken care of. But we need to be smart. We need to not just figure because we've got so much money in the bank, we should just go whole hog. We need to think, we need to plan, and we need to be responsible to the taxpayers.
Thank you. Sarah?
So one of the things that we've done really recently, which is something I'm very proud of, is our new teacher's contract, which Fred has alluded to a little bit. We used to have annual salary increases for our faculty of roughly 3% a year, which exceeded our tax cap. I mean, that's automatic deficit spending on salaries. So we now have renegotiated the contract, and it's now down to 1.83% over 10 years, which gives us much more wiggle room. So now instead of looking at cutting programming, we can look at how to better manage our money towards programming for our students. So certainly there is significant tax fatigue in this community. There's no doubt of that. As a school district, we have abated taxes twice while I've been in office. So we are very aware of the fact that our taxes are too high. And we're very diligent about it, and we have tried very hard to make sure that we contain costs. And I think our contract is just probably the biggest, but one of the best examples of that.
Thank you. Fred?
Sure, I'll echo Sarah's comments about our contract. The one thing the contract also does, it allows us to negotiate starting salaries. There had been a long-standing, I don't know, the procedure of a lack of discipline of hiring people in at mid-career. So that moves the whole graph over, all right? So we can negotiate starting salaries a lot lower than we had been able to under the old steps and lanes. But, so the contract is going to allow us to contain costs. The other thing is that I'm involved with heavily is, because of the Imagine project in the large cost of it is trying to put together a capital campaign and go out to our alumni, which is robust and very accomplished, and raise money just as if we were a private school or a college or a university. I think that we can raise a significant amount of funds to alleviate the tax burden on our taxpayers.
Could you repeat the question?
Absolutely. How will you strike a balance between needs of the district for budget increases to support student needs and a desire of the community to limit or even reduce taxes?
Yeah, so the good news is OPRF High School has adequate resources currently to have an equitable and excellent education system. The expenditures per child of close to $24,000 per kid, ranked 15th of all high school districts in the state, is about 29% above what the evidence indicates is needed to put in place the evidence-based practices for all children to succeed academically. But they're not. Despite being one of the highest spending districts in the state, our achievement gap, white minority, is worse than the state average. So what we really have to do is be thoughtful about reallocating these resources to ensure that we put in place the professional development, the approach to instruction, pedagogy, etc., the hiring practices, which are all evidence-based and shown to eliminate these achievement gaps. And what I can tell you is we can do that within the existing budget and inflationary increases going forward. And I should point out, we've been doing that at D90 for a while, and even our average teacher salary today is almost $7,000 lower than it was when I joined the board in 2012.
Thank you. Vic, you're going to start the next question. What will you do to make sure that in the new construction, I'm sorry, let me read this better. What will you do to make sure that in new construction, the school will incorporate solar in its construction plans to help with the large electrical bill?
Okay, well, I love this question because at the Park District, we've implemented solar panels at Ridgeland Common, Fox, Longfellow, and Green. And so that's something that we have experience doing. We've actually been paid to do that, and we've cut costs by $180,000 due to that, the cistern water savings and introducing LED lights. And so that's something I would definitely be supportive of and make sure that we put that into our plan. Actually, originally Common, it was originally a cost driver, so we held it out and then came back and put it on later when it was cost effective. So that's something definitely would be on my radar and I would push to implement.
Thank you. Amanda?
The great thing about solar nowadays is it is a whole lot less expensive than when it first came out about 20 years ago. And so in a lot of instances you can put it on, and if there's enough panels, they will buy the electricity back from you, so it actually helps pay for itself as well. The other thing that I brought up before was small wind turbines, and we get enough wind here that that's something we should look into as well. I looked into it personally when we were in Southern California for our house. I think all of these are viable things that we need to do, and because we need to be thinking in the future as well. So I think this is something that should be considered in the Imagine plan. I know we had some green roofs and those kinds of things, but I think solar is definitely something that should be looked at and considered all the way through this plan.
Thank you. Sarah?
So there's no doubt that we have to be very eco-friendly in building this new construction, because hopefully that's the building will be around for the next 7,500 years without much redo. We have looked at green roofs, we've also looked at solar roofs. Those decisions haven't been finalized yet, but there will definitely be a considerable look at how we best conserve energy in our new building. The reality is, if we're not going to take care of our kids' environment, what's the point of educating them in the first place? So we have to do the right thing by our students and by our community, and part of that is making sure that we are leaving the smallest footprint possible.
Thank you. Fred?
Yeah, well, I live a few blocks away in a condo building, and we looked at solar several years ago, and Amanda's right, the prices have come down drastically. There's still some government rebates that are available out there, but I think what we really need to look at and charge. We just hired a new architect of record, and we need to work with that architect of record to have a sustainability plan, which incorporates not only solar but green roofs. All right, if wind turbines are feasible, that would be great. But we already do recycle, we compost. We do some very responsible things, but we don't have the comprehensive plan. And I think with the new architecture company coming on board, it's something that we can easily develop with them, and they can incorporate in the plans that they'll be developing for the Imagine process.
Thank you. Ralph?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of a thoughtful approach to facilities planning going forward, and especially you have this very old building that's going to need some substantial renovations in the next few years. I mean, that's going to be inevitable. And so costing out, putting in solar, getting the appropriate federal and state subsidies for doing that kind of thing, and then looking at what that saves you in cost generation over time has to be a crucial part of any part of the planning to revise that facility. If that's not done, you're not doing your job. We at D90, once again, just to show you practice, we not only do composting and changed our lighting to be more environmentally friendly, we actually collaborate with Green for Good, a community group. We assess what we're doing environmentally at the school regularly. We report to see if we're improving. And so I think this is really part of making the school environment a sustainable environment and frankly, long-term cost containment. But the planning has to be done thoughtfully. It has to be part of your long-term facilities plan. It has to be on there with the other needs. And it has to not only be affordable, but something that fits into your facilities plan.
Thank you.
Gina?
Sorry, Gina.
That's okay. I think that solar is definitely an important piece, but it's only one piece. I think that we do need to be looking at all of the sustainability efforts that we could be putting into the facilities as we're doing this remodel. And I also think that there are a lot of ways for us to be thinking about funding for that. In my role as a director for the National Education Association, we've been in NBC most recently lobbying for the Rebuilding America School Act, which would bring another $80 billion back into ordinances that would allow us funds to do this very work. So I think it's important that we're looking at all of those ways, but I would like to take it a step further. Not only are we looking at how the building itself becomes sustainable, but what kind of sustainable programming are we putting in place for our students so that these are like the budding careers that are coming up. So for us to be thinking about not only are we building it into our facilities and making sure that plan is long-term and sustainable, but how is it impacting our students?
Thank you. It's actually going to be passed down to Amanda. We'll start with the next question. What are your thoughts of a collaboration with the park districts for a proposed shared community recreation center?
Well, the benefit of doing that, if we're talking about, for instance, covering Ridgeland Common, is that it would open up a whole lot of space in the high school. Because we all know that the high school is space scarce. There's not enough room there to add vocational training, which is a big thing that I would like to see added for students that don't go on to college and so on. As more and more kids don't go on to college, to add other vocational things. And we can go in partnership with different facilities and different, possibly some unions of different companies, as Vic had mentioned at another forum. And I think this is something that we need to look at strongly, because when I met with Jan Arnold in regards to the Park District and covering Ridgeland Common, we also talked about adding a second story to make it a whole rec center, and add counseling and a whole lot of other things. And it would be close enough to the high school. But more importantly, again, it would open up space in the high school that we so desperately need for needs.
Thank you. Sarah?
I certainly would be open to the idea. Obviously, the devil's in the details, and we need to know more about how that would look. Right now, swimming is part of our physical education requirements, so it certainly can be a time to and from a pool. But need to be taken into consideration as with scheduling with the community to make sure that the community has fair access to it. Vic actually came and spoke to the board earlier this month, last month at Elders, and talked about looking again and collaborating, and posed a really interesting suggestion in that perhaps we could even have the Park District help us pay for a pool in the high school that the community could have greater access to. Certainly that might be a solution that fits everyone's needs very nicely. So I would be very welcome to those sorts of conversations around how and where and more details on this issue.
Thank you. Fred?
Yeah, yes, I'm very open to collaboration with all other governmental entities. Vic and I actually served together on a committee for about a year and a half, looking at the community center. The Park District had done a feasibility study. They knew what the needs of the high school were. We sat. One of the major hurdles that we have to get by is that the name of the school is Oak Park and River Forest High School, and we have to be very cognizant of the fact that we have to serve our taxpayers and our students from River Forest as well. And in this particular situation, what kind of the whole thing fell apart was because the River Forest Park District, because of the location, backed out. So I think there are collaborations that we already do, baseball fields, tennis courts, etc. I think that if we can find a location, if we can find a plan for a facility, and it makes sense, I think we absolutely should do it.
Thank you. Ralph?
Yeah, you always look to leverage community assets if you can to save taxpayer money and provide the service. However, I think Sarah said it, she's entirely right. The devils really are in the details in something like this. a student has to be somewhere at all times. And if the pool is no longer located on the facility, you now have transportation time, the kid to the pool and back, locker room changing time. Accommodating that and having appropriate amount of time for the students to actually utilize the pool, learn this way, is more of a challenge than you would think, right? You don't want to take away from math, reading, etc. Insurance issues come up. So I am all for looking at these collaborative opportunities. We've looked at a few actually over time with the tennis club at D200 and River Forest, trying to maximize the taxpayer benefit for what we have in the community, but you have to make sure that it is something that works for both River Forest and Oak Park and for your students and for their scheduling.
Thank you. Gina?
I already mentioned how I feel about us looking to work more collaboratively with the other organizing bodies, organized governmental bodies in our village, so I definitely support the idea of us having these conversations with the Park District. I do want to ensure that the feasibility is really there when we begin having conversations about this, because if we're talking about instructional time and we're talking about the amount of time that students have to be in a class, to get to a class, to suck up as much knowledge as they can in the little minutes that each educator has to teach them. I think we really need to be mindful about those details as we begin to look at those partnerships. But I think those partnerships are highly valuable, and they're not only valuable to our students, which is the most important piece, but they're highly valuable to our community because it will begin to engage us in different ways where there are current walls. It will begin to have conversations that will open things up a little bit more.
Thank you. Vic?
So I'm currently president of the Park District, and we're interested in collaborating either on the rec center or even just the pool. So I think we need to do a long-term financial plan once again to see how we can most cost-effectively meet the needs for pool and athletics and the other needs identified by the Imagine process. And so that can come in a number of different ways. We could just renovate within the existing footprint, the East Pool, for example, to meet the needs of swimming classes. We don't agree completely. I don't think it's reasonable to expect the kids to go for swimming classes off-site, but can we save money, renovate within the existing footprint? Expanding outside that footprint is what drives the cost of the pool, because now you have to do major structural renovations to the building. Do we cover original and common or partner in other ways with the Park District for competition pool and diving?
Thank you. We're going to pass that down to Sarah. In the America to Me documentary, what was a surprise to you, and what was something that you already knew about the high school environment?
I think the surprise was that it was as bad as I feared for some of our students. I don't know that that documentary reflected a majority of our students' experience, but I think it accurately reflected some of our students' experience. And for even one student to be having an experience similar to what some of those students were going through is not acceptable. So I guess that didn't surprise me. I'm sort of cheating and using both for one. But American Me certainly highlighted, I think, in a way that was very helpful to our community, exactly what the issue is. We can explain it, but it's not the same as really seeing it and hearing the lived experience of these students. And the students are so charming and so smart and so charismatic that they were the best spokespeople. So I'm really hopeful that the community now is poised to help us make these really important changes for our students, and I feel that it is.
Thank you. Fred?
The documentary, now Sarah and I lived through it, and we lived through the documentary. We had the camera in our face at every board meeting, scores and scores and scores of hours. And what surprised me is how little of the work that we actually did as a board ended up on the film. There was a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous number of initiatives that we instituted that did not end up on film. That being said, I think there's a great value, and it really didn't surprise me. I knew that we had problems. I knew that was one of the reasons I ran, because of the inequities. But the two great values that come out of that film is, number one, first and foremost, are the stories around the kids. They are incredible stories, they're incredibly valuable. And then the second value is that it engaged the community, all right? We showed our dirty laundry in public, all right? And that it's engaged the community, it's put pressure on the board and on the district, all right, to correct the things that are wrong, all right, and that has to do with equity.
Thank you. Ralph?
Okay, I wasn't surprised at all. And in fact, there's two reasons I wasn't surprised at all. Number one, my son was actually in the high school while that was being filmed, and certainly had a lot of friends who were feeling the sense of alienation because of their race that that film exposed. So there was no surprise on sort of the personal level. On the professional level, the think tank I work for, we do systems analysis, public systems, and we actually have an entire research team devoted just to structural racism. And what we've seen is these large public sector systems that were initially intended to create access to opportunity for everyone have frequently instead created barriers to low-income populations generally and black and brown populations specifically. And when you look at the data for this high school, very high spending, yet a significant achievement gap, you know that those barriers are there. You know that that structural racism is incorporated in the building. The data just tell you that. And so I think it's great if it raised consciousness in the community, and now the question is how we take the community's awareness at the board level and move it to a strategic approach to eliminating structural racism in that building.
Thank you. Gina?
I also was not surprised. I mean, I wasn't surprised because I'd already been to the school a number of times and had conversations about issues that we have experienced. I was not surprised because it's not unique to Oak Park, except we have made a declaration that we are going to be the kind of community that works together. And so for our work to be on display in that way was disappointing, right, to say the least. I was part of the team that coordinated the community conversations that happened following the film for the 10-week series, and in our coordination of those conversations, a big piece of it was how many people are going to show up. So what surprised me was the amount of people that showed up. Every week we had at least 150 to 200 people stay after those viewings and have conversations about what really needed to happen. And what was happening in the high school is indicative of what is happening in our community, and how are we all working together to make sure that this no longer is an issue. And I also am a little bit surprised that we are having this conversation as if it's over, but the students who are in the building right now are still having that experience. So we still have a lot of work to do, so yeah.
Thank you. Vic?
So nothing was really a surprise. As I mentioned before, I'm a graduate. My siblings, my daughters, and all my nieces and nephews have or will be graduating. And so they live this all the time, and let's not underestimate the kids. My kids might not be African American, but they go to school with African Americans. They see this, they observe this, and back home at the dinner table, we would talk about what they observed and what they could see in the school. And we knew several of the kids who were in the movie. They're urban kids from the neighborhood. We know their parents, and so we've heard their stories over the years of what they've all gone through. So it's not surprising. So I just want to, follow up on what Gina said. This is ongoing. I've heard a lot of comments both ways on supporting the movie. I think it was great that we did it. I'm glad the board did went ahead with it because it did put pressure on the community to really focus on this. And going through this whole campaign, the emphasis on equity and the opportunity gap has been tremendous. And I think it's the spur that we need to finally make a dent in this problem.
Thank you. Amanda?
I was surprised. I didn't realize it was as bad as it was. I went to the high school and went through the discussion meetings afterwards, and I got angry. I got angry that, because first of all, we're better than that. We're supposed to be diverse, and we're spending more than $23,000 per student. And we have kids that are coming out of there that aren't prepared, and it's just not okay. But I also had to realize that these kids were also coming from other districts in the same kind of condition, and that we need to work and collaborate with them to make these changes, whether it's a racial equity program or curriculum, especially curriculum, so that these kids are taken care of all the way through. The statistics show that we need to catch them before 3rd grade, to be able to catch them up and work with them and give them extra help to catch them up so that this doesn't happen. So it's not going to be a short-term thing as far as correcting it, Now is the time, because everybody, like you said, the dirty laundry has been aired, everybody's aware of it, now's the time to do something about it.
Thank you. The next question is going to start with Fred. What role do you see for extracurricular activities, including sports, in assuring student success?
Well, I've been involved in extracurricular activities, like I said before, for 41 years. I believe it's the other half of education. I believe that to develop that extracurricular activities, whether it's sports, whether it's activities, whether it's performing arts, spoken word, you have it, develops a child's social and emotional well-being, their character, their ability to work together as a group to contribute to the greater good. We also have empirical evidence that that students who participate in extracurricular activities have grade point averages that are almost 1 full point higher than those who don't, and have significant, almost 60% less disciplinary issues. All right. So we have a very high percentage of our students, I believe it's close to 80%, that participate in at least one extracurricular activity. I think they're essential to the development of youth.
Thank you. Ralph?
Yeah, so, and Fred hit on this, but it's entirely true. All the research, there's no contrary research, shows that robust enrichment programs enhance student learning, period, end of story, number one. Number two, a lot of students are motivated to go to school, not, believe it or not, to derive the most recent algorithm, but to participate in soccer, to be in theater, to do the arts. And those programs become essential because they are motivating. And the other thing they really provide is an opportunity to really address equity issues, because a lot of times the enrichment programs are on a far more level playing field. And students that feel a sense of alienation, maybe from other barriers in the building, feel more of a sense of camaraderie going through the theater, the sports programs, et cetera. So they're crucial. And in fact, from an equity lens, number one, a lot of students wouldn't have the opportunity to participate in these things if, in fact, they weren't offered at the high school. And number two, when they apply to colleges, sometimes they can't afford to go, but for getting a scholarship in the arts or in sports, et cetera. So it's a really, really valuable part of an education.
Thank you. Gina?
So we know that the single most effective measure of a student's success is if they have an adult in the building that they trust and that they can confide in. And that comes a lot of the times from extracurricular activities. So I know my daughter's experience was rough in certain patches, but there were adults in that building that she knew she could go to. And being involved in extracurricular activities and having the opportunity to have that means that they have a safe space to go to, that they have someone that they trust, and that, as has been said, that they have a place that they want to show up to every day, because the experience in the classroom may not always be that for them. And in order for them to be invested, they do need extracurricular activities, so I value them quite highly.
Thank you. Vic?
I'm just going to echo what everyone else has said, basically, and I think the role of extracurriculars and athletics is critical to the success of our students. Study after study shows that kids who are involved do better in school for all the reasons that Gina just articulated. They feel a sense of belonging, feel a connection, and they're motivated to come to the school. And that's one great thing about OPRF is that it does have every imaginable activity, not just sports, but after school activities for kids so that they can explore. What we probably have to do is figure out ensuring that all our kids are aware of all these programs, they have the opportunities to actually join and belong and participate in all of them.
Thank you. Amanda?
My oldest son was a swimmer and played water polo, and but he was a student and he did that more for exercise than anything else, even though he was good at it. My youngest wouldn't even have gone to high school if he wasn't in football or doing track, so that literally got him there. And he got a scholarship to a college he would not have gotten into had it not been for that. I mean, he barely made it out of high school. But then he rose to the occasion, finished with a 3.0, and he finished college at a good university on the East Coast in 4 years. So I'm a big believer in extracurricular activities. They enhance the educational experience for sure. But there are a lot of kids who don't, go do these extracurricular. And we need to be paying attention to them as well. And that's why, offering them a curriculum that's well-rounded and that offers various things is important. And the great thing about OPRF is we offer so many different kinds of extracurricular activities for all students.
Thank you. Sarah?
So yes, being involved in extracurriculars does teach a student really important skills like time management skills, the ability to work with others. Education and pedagogy has changed drastically since any of us were in school. Pretty much since any of us were in school. So the jobs of the future are not about working for the same Ford factory for 40 years. People have to be much more flexible in adapting to new situations. People have to be able to transition to new jobs as industries sort of wax and wane. And our kids are very good at doing that, right? The internet is a prime example of the flexibility that they have to do almost anything they want. Extracurricular activities, especially sports, teach students how to work with other people and collaborate towards a common goal, even when you might have very different personalities, right? This helps our students understand how to work in the workforce of today. So I think it's imperative that we continue to work to ensure all of our students have an extracurricular that they're invested in, and that's something that we've been doing very diligently and very strategically since we've been on the board.
Thank you. Ralph is going to have this question. I think this may be the last question, time management here. Some of the higher rated high schools that has higher test scores than OPRF spend less per pupil. As a board member, how do you defend our per pupil spending?
Well, I think I made it clear before that I think we don't get the bang for our buck that we should get from our expenditures. And so what I would look to do is investigate 3 core areas that have been shown to move the needle on enhancing student achievement, frankly, for all students. And number 1 is pedagogy or instruction, whatever word you want to use. There are a number of practices out there right now that have been shown to resonate with all learners of all different abilities, all races, and all ethnicities. And in fact, I happen to be a professor of public policy at Roosevelt University. The professional development I take on pedagogy is literally incorporating some of these new practices in my classroom for grad students. And it's really powerful and effective because it gets the student to own more of their learning. So that's number 1. We really need to look at that approach to teaching, and we need to implement it. That's low cost. That's not something that's going to change cost factors. Number 2, really to eliminate the achievement gap, we need evidence-based professional development on the implicit bias that gets embedded in the classroom and that's repeated and ongoing 3 or 4 times a year, not a one-off one time. That won't solve our problems. Both of those are low-cost alternatives that have major impacts on student achievement across the board.
Thank you. Gina?
Can you repeat the question?
Certainly.
Some of the higher rated high schools that have higher test scores than OPRF spend less per pupil. As a board member, how do you defend our pupil spending, our per pupil spending?
Yeah, I just didn't want to negate that part about the test scores. First of all, test scores are not the only metric that we need to be looking at to determine the success of our students. We really do need to be looking at their overall, what is the goal that they've set for themselves, and are they able to accomplish it when they leave our school system? So to me, that's a little bit more important than just, are they meeting the test score? Also, this defending our per pupil spending, so in order to be able to defend that, it actually has to be equitable to me. So if we're spending almost $24,000 a year per student, but we know that certain students are still not having access. So when we start having a conversation about access, we start having a conversation about an opportunity gap, we're actually talking about opportunity versus achievement and what are those pieces that are missing for the students who don't have that. So if we are spending $24,000 a year per student, which students aren't actually getting the resources that they need and which are getting more? And how do we balance that out? But it's not like a pie that you actually get a smaller piece. It doesn't work that way. How it works is we have the opportunity to make sure that all of the students get what they need. And the amount that we spend is justified if they actually are all getting that.
Thank you. Vic?
Okay, so I think like Gina said, I think we have to be careful about making these comparisons between schools because demographics and equity issues skew test scores. And as she said, test scores are not the be all and end all how we want to necessarily compare. How well prepared are our kids when they get out and to be successful in life. An example that I don't think we have time to get into. That said, I don't think we're getting the best bang for our buck. We are spending, excessively, not excessively, but we are spending a significant amount of money above what evidence-based funding says that we should. So we should demand from our administration better outcomes. I think that's the role of the board, is to set goals and demand from our administration. They're the educational experts in the school, and they need to put together the evidence-based pedagogy and programs, and then have set goals that they need to achieve, and then we evaluate those programs and make the changes as needed.
Thank you. Amanda?
I can't defend it. I think it's way too much money. When we look at labor, that's about 80% of our budget, so that's a constant. There's not much we can do about it, but we can do a lot as far as looking at each line item and taking a look at it and see if we can do better. And I think that's what needs to be done. We need to be aggressive and take a look at every little thing that's on our expenses and say, can we do better? Is there a different way? Can we collaborate with another group? Is there a way that we can do this differently? This is the only way we're going to start nickel and diming to be able to save some money. And I think this is something that the board should have been doing all along, especially when you consider that they have been running over budget for the last few years. And yet, being at board meetings, I haven't heard too much of that being talked about, except in the last 6 months. So I admire the fact that they finally have a balanced budget, but I think this is something we need to look at specifically line by line and take a look at to save the taxpayers some money.
Thank you. Sarah?
So we can do better, right? That's the reality of it. $24,000 is plenty to educate our students, and frankly, if we were sending our kids to private school, we might not be paying even that much. However, we have a new superintendent in town, and she is incredible, and if you haven't had the pleasure of meeting her, I suggest you try to. She is completely, almost entirely turned over her administrators. One of her best skills is that she hires incredible people. Greg Johnson is our new Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. He replaced Phil Crail, who some of you might know. And he is going through a year-by-year audit of every single class in that school to make sure that the rigor is the same across every single class. So English 1 is the same no matter what teacher you have. And to ensure that all of our classes articulate to the next level. That has long been a criticism of the high school, especially the middle college prep track does not have the rigor that people have wanted. And this year we're starting with 9th grade, next year 10th, and we'll go on through all 4 years. And I anticipate that we'll see dramatic results from Greg's work.
Thank you. Fred?
Okay, so I think our problem is not necessarily in the test scores themselves, but in that gap. We still have some very high achieving students. If anyone attended graduation knows that Sarah and I sat on the dais last spring with 33 scholarship cup winners. Our high achieving students are doing incredible work. We have a 95% graduation rate. Our black students graduated at a rate of 94%. We have a 85% rate of kids entering college, either in a 2 or a 4-year program. The problem is the accessibility, especially for our minority students, into a movement between tracks from college prep into honors in AP. We worked on that through establishing what we call a Husky Scholar Academy, which used to be equal opportunity schools, but exactly what Sarah said about Greg Johnson, there has to be a review of our curriculum. We have to widen the gray areas between the tracks and set higher expectations for our students.
Thank you. We're going to start with closing statements, and Gina, you're going to be first.
So first, thank you all for putting this together tonight. Really, it's been an honor to have an opportunity to get to speak. I really like when I get to hear your questions too, because it's interesting to see what our community has as their main concern. So thank you for coming out tonight. I just wanted to end by saying, You know, I've spent a good amount of my years in corporate America and left it to become a teacher, and being in education has been the most fulfilling work of my life so far, and truly my favorite career. Having the opportunity to serve our community as a taxpayer, and as a parent, and as a woman, and as all of the things that I am, to have the opportunity to represent and ensure that we're moving forward the agenda that is the agenda of our community, that says that this is who we are and this is what's important for our students, and really doing the work to see them accomplish this. And I have a lot of experience in doing that on the ground with educators in multiple school districts, so I would love to bring that to where we are. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dick?
Okay, so I wanted to thank you for this opportunity to speak here today. So if elected, I will work to create accountability by defining concrete and measurable goals of equity and academic achievement. I'll also work to implement needed infrastructure improvements that are directly tied to academic performance, and then I will also work to end the pool saga in a fiscally responsible way that includes partnering with other government bodies. I have a wide range of professional and volunteer experience that I believe can help D200 meet its challenges. OPRF is a great school, and together as a community we can meet its current challenges and continue our tradition of academic excellence and graduate thinkers, leaders, and dreamers of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
We can do better, and the truth of the matter is we used to do better, and so there's no reason that we can't get back to where we were before. And the great thing about America to me is it woke up the community, and the community is now involved in saying, yeah, we need to do better. We need to make sure that all the kids are graduating with what they need. We need to be fiscally responsible in regards to it. We also need to do the right thing. I'm retired, so I have plenty of time to do this. Anybody who knows me knows that I've been involved for a long time. And this is something that I have a heart to do once I saw it. And so I would appreciate your vote for me. I have a website. You can see many of the questions that I answered from the many questionnaires that were sent to me, and which have questions that weren't asked tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
So, you know, Fred and I have been doing this work, right? If you had asked me 2.5 years ago if I was going to run again, I would have said probably not. Going through the pool saga has been really just a distressing experience, I think, for all of us. So I had no intention of running again, but the last 2 years with Dr. Pruitt-Adams and fellow board members who are really interested in the same things I'm interested in helping drive our mission forward has been inspiring. You know, we have this phenomenal board right now. The reality is, though, being a new board member, there's a good year runway that you need to get up to speed and be able to be effective. Turnover on boards, complete turnover, is not a good thing. It just stymies the mission and it stops the work. It truncates it. Consistency on a board is important. Certainly new voices are also very important, but you have to have a good blend. I think that I've proven over the past 4 years what my vision and values are. I think they're in keeping with this community, and I hope you vote for me. My name is Sarah Dixon-Spivey, so thank you.
Thank you. Fred?
So I'm truly humbled and grateful to our community for having the confidence to put me on this board 4 years ago. Sarah and I have worked tirelessly on a number of different issues and initiatives. The one thing that I've learned by being on this board is how complex an institution D200 really is. There's a year-long, at minimum year-long learning curve. And I thought I knew it all walking in because I was so close and have been so close to it all of my life. The real work that we have to do is the reason we hired Dr. Pruitt-Adams. As a board member, what do? We set policy and we hire a superintendent. Right? We don't get into the weeds. All right? That's her job. We hired an incredibly experienced, compassionate, empathetic woman, all right, to specifically do our racial equity work. And she challenged us when we hired her. All of the members of the board, we unanimously said that we were on board with the work that she knew she has to do. And I would love to be able to continue that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ralph?
So I'm running for this position for a real simple reason. I'm very familiar with what goes on in that high school. I've been honored to serve actually on the Culture Climate Committee you established, Sarah, since its inception. And I'm aware that there are significant barriers to certain of our students in that building. And I also know you can eliminate those barriers. And I also know an educational system can be designed in a manner where every student feels not just welcome, but receives an education that enables that student to succeed academically. I've successfully put in place equity programs, not just at D200, but in other states, and in fact changed our school funding formula. I've worked with people across the ideological spectrum, and in fact, focus on bridging ideological divides so that we can move forward together as a community, and in this case, as a community of the school, to solve this really difficult problem. Because at the end of the day, the board's responsibility doesn't end with hiring a superintendent or passing a policy. It ends in monitoring the implementation of that policy to make sure you achieve your goals and changing policy as it goes forward if you're not achieving those goals. That's what I'll bring to the board if you choose to elect.
I'd like to thank all of you for coming, and I'd like you to also thank these candidates who have done a lot of work in the last 2 or 3 months.